पंचरात्रि की विधिम बिना ऐकांतिकी हरेर भक्ति उत्पातायैव kalpate. So when our practice of bhakti is unguided by scripture, then it leads to disruption. So I'll talk about disruption in three ways that can happen, and I also talk about how within the bhakti tradition itself there are warnings and resources given for us to prevent this from happening. Now, when we are practicing bhakti, we are broadly, we could say, we are dealing with three levels, or we could say, there is God who is above us, it's Krishna whom we are trying to reach. Then we have the devotee circle around us. Now, this could be people who are already devotees, people who are going to become devotees. That's the devotee circle. And then we also have, now this may be smaller or bigger, maybe it is smaller. This is our family or our social circle that might be there. We may all have, based on our profession or our previous life, we may have a social circle which may not necessarily be a devotee circle. So, in each of these, see, we all belong to some larger wholes. And when we are in those larger wholes, how we approach, that is important. So, essentially, in our approach with others, so the danger is in our approach with Krishna, we may become irrational. And we'll see how that can lead to disruption. In our approach to devotees and potential devotees, we may become insensitive. And in our family and our social circle, we may become irresponsible. So these three things, being irrational, being insensitive, or being irresponsible, these can cause disruption. And we all can learn how this happens. We may observe how it happens, and then we can see how we can prevent it. So let's discuss this one by one. And what does the word irrational mean? Any thoughts? Non-discriminating, okay. That one is the more precise. Now, nowadays, there's a lot of discrimination against the word discrimination. Because there's racial discrimination, caste discrimination, gender discrimination. So, quite often we use the word discernment instead of discrimination. You know, the word discern is to analyze. So, but there is this word indiscriminate, or somebody may be undiscerning. They may not be careful in looking at things. So that's one aspect of irrational. Anything else? Sentimental, yes. Irrational is whimsical. Okay. Illogical, yes. So broadly, what happens in, these are all valid meanings, in irrationality is there, basically, like in the name of devotion, we send intelligence on an exile. So just as Kaikai had Ram sent on Vanvas, we send the Buddhi on a Vanvas. We exile the intelligence. So what happens is, in the name of devotion, the intelligence can become devalued. You know, don't be a jnani. Don't be over analytical. It can be dismissed. Not only dismissed, it can even be demonized. No, that you think too much, if you ask too many questions, you will become a perpetual doubting person. What is that? Samshaya Atma Vinashya. You ask too many questions, you will commit offenses. Vaishnavera kriya mudra vigyahana bhujare. Don't ask any questions about other people's behavior. So, so, so sometimes when this happens in the name of devotion, that can lead to serious problems. So I'll talk about each of these ways devotion can be disruptive, can be discussed elaborately, but I'll talk about three broad ways in which it's manifest. It can happen. So at a basic level, what can happen is that people start believing in miracles. There is a naive. People become very naive. And now, can God do miracles? Of course, it's possible. But there are many claims of miracles which may actually not be true. So I'll talk about these three broad levels of problems. Now, these are not specific to any particular tradition. They can occur anywhere. But I'll talk about these it in non-Vedic religions. Then I'll talk about something in irrationality can appear within the Vedic religion. And then I'll talk about how irrationality can cause problem in our own Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. So, especially in Christianity, there is this whole concept of faith healing. The faith healing is if you believe in Jesus. You just pray to Jesus, accept Jesus as your savior, and you will be healed. And there are cases where somebody goes on crutches in front, and the pastor puts some sacred water, and the person just throws away the crutches. I can walk. I have been healed. Now, there are many expose videos about this showing how this is actually elaborate deception. Sometimes it's a psychological fervor that is created, just like there's a placebo effect. Sometimes somebody thinks that I got a medicine and they feel healed. But if there's actually a serious disease, it doesn't get healed. So sometimes those people are not at all crippled. They just pretend to be. Sometimes they may be, and they seem to get cured. But then after that, it doesn't last for long. I'm not going to specifically the way in which it happens. But my point is, while miracles can happen, but miracles can also be used to irrationally mislead and exploit people. So sometimes it happens that, say, you go to a hospital which is run by some Christian missionaries. Now, this is not to demonize Christianity at all. No, the Bhagavad Gita says that there is Shraddha can mean Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. So there are Christians who are in Sattva Guna, there are Christians who are Rajoguna, there are Christians who are in Tamoguna. So these are tamasic ways of preaching that are done by some Christians. And the point here is not to criticize Christianity. The point is to highlight how irrationality can lead people to be exploited. And we could find similar examples in the Hindu tradition also. So the point is that if people think that I don't have to think, then they can be very easily exploited. Similarly, fanaticism, extremism, radicalism, generally it happens when devotion to one's particular way of worship, one particular way of religion, comes at the expense of reason. This is how it is, this is what you have to believe, this is how you have to live, that's all. And I have a friend in California who has done his PhD in de-radicalization. In the Western world, there's a lot of immigration from the Middle East also. So there is a lot of concern how people who come from the Middle East, how they can be integrated into the broader community. So there is, in UK, there's a huge immigration. That's one of the reasons UK went out of EU and there was Brexit. But now in London, actually the number of white people is actually less than the number of immigrants. And so they have a lot of concern about, we don't want these people who have come from a different place to become radicalized. So one of the things is that education and employment within the broader world. When people just mix with other people, we have stereotypes about, oh, these people are like this, these people are like this. But when you actually interact with people, when you get educated, when we give reason and opportunity, is this person really like this? This person not. Now, does that ensure that nobody will become radicalized? No, of course, people will still become radicalized. But the point is, radicalization happens because of there is devotion that is at the expense of reason. The Bhagavatam also talks about dharma, about Shraddha in the three modes. So that is intolerant and separatist, and it becomes violent afterwards. So when we irrationally believe whatever we are told without using our intelligence, there's a difference between every religious tradition has to give education, but there's a difference between education and indoctrination. Education is more about how to think. It is about the process of thinking, to develop our thinking ability. Indoctrination is about what to think. It is about the finished product. This is what you have to think, and that's all there is to it. So, what actually spiritual tradition should be giving is education or indoctrination? Education. So, now if you consider this is within the uh, broad religious landscape where in the name of devotion people can become irrational and violent. Now if you consider in the Vedic tradition itself, so here we can have faith healing and radicalization. So radicalism is basically extremism, fanaticism. Now in the Vedic tradition, we have this whole tradition of, now there are demigods and there are semi-gods. Say me God. I am God. So I am God. So any person who can do a little bit miracles, anybody who can do something extraordinary, they start claiming I am God. I was in America and there's people put all kinds of crazy things on their t-shirts. So I was in a college and there was one boy had a slogan on his t-shirt. I was an atheist till I discovered I was God. So people, this is a very self-serving belief that I am God. And yes, there are people who can do some miracles. And there are mystic powers by which miracles are possible. But miracles themselves are not the evidence of God. And when there is this claim to be God, the result of that is that the devotion that is meant for God gets misdirected towards someone else. And devotion to that person cannot give higher taste. Now, that person may not be immoral, that person may also be a good person. Maybe they don't say, call me God, but others call them God and they accept it, whatever the reason. But no person can elevate others the way God can. Everyone else is meant to be a link to God. So, India is going through a very interesting cultural phenomena now. India is becoming, there is religiously reassertive after the building of the Ram temple, and there is religious reassertiveness. But at the same time, there is a lot of materialism, like a lot of seeking wealth, flaunting wealth, and that itself is not a bad thing if it raises people above poverty and enables people to live without too much anxiety. But quite often, the it's like India is becoming religious and it is becoming materialistic. We're not becoming really spiritual. So there are these temples of Ganesh called Visa Ganesh temples. It's like, oh, the biggest obstacle in my life is the American embassy is not giving me a visa. So, oh Lord Ganesh, please give me a visa. So I was in Varanasi and I saw a temple of Hanuman over there, and right on top of that temple, small temple, is written, "Tum to ho brahmachari, mujhe de do ek nari." You are a brahmachari. You don't need any woman. Give me one woman, please. Now I don't know whether it was a joke or not. If it was a joke, it was a bad taste to write something like that on a temple. So what happens is now this idea of people claiming to be God can have many effects. But I'm going to focus on this one thing, that there is loss of higher taste. And when there is no higher taste, the higher taste that actually comes by bhakti will make people religious and spiritual. But today, what is happening is people are religious and materialistic. Are they necessarily becoming spiritual? That is questionable. So, this leads to a lot of uncritical acceptance of anything and everything in the name of religion. Apparently, it's not only like religious teachers who are made into God. Uh, there are temples for movie stars also. There are temples of Amitabh Bachchan, there are temples of Madhuri Dixit, there are temples of many South Indian stars. So what happens is that there was one European thinker. He said sarcastically, but many Indians, many Hindus quote it proudly. Actually, they put it as a glory of India quote. Because as far as religion is concerned, India is the only millionaire. Now, what they meant by that, all religions have one God. Indians have millions of gods and they keep increasing. So there was one Indian devotee's son. He showed me a quote of how ideas are being circulated. Like this, Indians are becoming more assertive, culturally, religiously. So there's an Indian boy in America. An American boy is asking him, "Why do you people worship so many gods?" And the Indian boy scratches his head and he says, "We like to keep backups." So basically, when devotion is at the cost of reason, then it becomes like a license of free for all. Now, free for all means anybody can do anything in the name of devotion. That leads to disruption in many different ways, at least in the sense that people don't really grow spiritually. Now, within the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition itself, this the lack of reason has led to Sahajiyaism. Sahajiyaism was a very peculiar phenomenon. Now, the meanings of words change with time. Now, Sahaj originally meant natural, easy, spontaneous. So there is one devotee friend who is studying Bengali and Bengali Vaishnavism. He showed me a book which was written almost 300, 400 years ago. How Ramanand Rai was a glorious Sahajiya Vaishnava. So Sahajiya was not an insult at that time. That he was such an exalted devotee with spontaneous devotion. But now it has come to mean cheap. Those who take devotion very cheap. So now what exactly happened with respect to Sahajiyaism is that basically there are characteristics of advanced devotion. And in a pious society, in a devotional society community, when those symptoms are exhibited, that is seen as a sign of, oh, this is exalted devotee. There's a lot of respect. While taking darshan, if we see somebody who's crying tears, somebody falls and starts fainting or their hair started on end. And then these are all signs of exalted devotion. And these transformations are vividly described in the founding texts of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Chaitanya Charitamrita and other such texts. But over the centuries, what started happening was people who did not have that level of devotion started pretending to have that level of devotion and to get respect. And this had become very rampant by the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhakti Thakur. And that's why they spoke very strongly against it. That basically, so there is devotion pretended to be there for the sake of prestige. Now that itself is bad enough. So, but it can cause very serious disruption when it goes far beyond. The Sahajiyaism can be at many levels, but at a basic level, we may ourselves claim premature spiritual experiences. So, for example, I asked one devotee that, how did you come to bhakti? Hmm. So he said, first time I came to Radha Gopinath temple, I looked at Gopinath and Gopinath winked at me. I was so amazed by it. I kept coming, waiting for Gopinath to wink at me again. But in waiting for him, I started participating in kirtan, started attending classes, and then the philosophy and the practice attracted me. So now, could Gopinath have winked? Now, we don't know. Gopinath, we can't say Gopinath can't do something like that. But here the result was anukul, isn't it? Like somebody may claim to have some supernatural experiences. Like so Krishna came in my dream yesterday. Can Krishna come in our dream? No, who are we to stop Krishna from coming in someone's dream? Isn't it? But the point is, the result has to be anukul. So once one person came to Prabhupada and said, Swamiji, Krishna came in my dream yesterday. And Prabhupada said, all right, serve him today. So the point is, yes, if there are supernatural experiences, fine. But they should inspire us to commit ourselves to our relationship with Krishna. Hmm? So when there are some spiritual experiences, we have to see whether their effect is favorable or unfavorable. We don't have to reject or dismiss such experiences. But what we can say is that actually, if such experiences are there, uh, don't publicize them. Don't cheapen them by seeking prestige through them. Hmm? See them as indications. Whether it is Krishna actually doing it, whether it is the mind creating some hallucination, don't go into that so much. Even if it is a hallucination created by the mind, ultimately it couldn't have happened without Krishna's sanction. So see that as Krishna encouraging you in the path of bhakti, and commit yourself to the path of bhakti more. But so there can be premature spiritual experiences that can be favorable. Hmm? But there can be pretense of ecstasy. Hmm? And this can be especially damaging because a person may claim to be respectable and glorious, and naive people may start accepting that. So Gaur Kishodas Babaji used the example, let's say when a woman is pregnant and she is nearing delivery, then as the water breaks or the contractions happen, become more and more, then she will start screaming because the pain of the delivery is there, the baby is coming out. Now if she starts screaming, all the loud ones and others attendants, they come there running and they try to offer support and care and everything. And through her screaming and through the whole process of pregnancy, a beautiful new life is going to come. But suppose seeing how much attention that woman is getting, some other woman says, I'll also start screaming. And she's not pregnant at all. Now her screaming may attract some attention initially, but eventually people will say there's nothing to pay attention to over here. And her screaming is not going to lead to a child being born. So similarly, he says that when a devotee is filled with love for Krishna, a devotee is pregnant with love for Krishna, then there may be ecstatic symptoms. And those may attract others. But the result of those ecstatic symptoms is that just like a baby is born, through those ecstatic symptoms, our devotion gets deepened. Our attraction to Krishna becomes stronger. It is not that we start becoming more and more dependent on the world's praise. So if that second thing is happening, that is unhealthy. So devotion can cause disruption. The most toxic, however, is through what Prabhupada called as there is Ras Leela and there is Rascal Leela. Now, what is this Rascal Leela? There is, in the Bhakti tradition, there is this concept of Avesh. There are two ways in which the divine there is the spiritual level and there's the material level. So the normal way is what we call as avatar. So the avatar comes from the spiritual level and descends to the material level and stays for a lifespan and then departs. But there is something called Avesh. Avesh is where the divine enters into a person. The Chaitanya Charitamrita said that Nakula Brahmachari, when he would speak, it was as if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was speaking to him. That's what people felt. His Avesh had entered. Now, in the culture of drama, dramaturgy or Natya, there is this concept of avesh which is very prominent. That when somebody is actually doing a drama, they should so deeply, prayerfully, devotionally enter into the mood of that character that it is almost as if the avesh of that character enters in that person. In Varanasi, when they have this Ram Leela, they do the drama of Ram. Like the boy who acts as Ram, on that day his father will come and bow down to that boy. Today you are not my son. Today, actually Ram is having an avesh to you. So that is the mood over there. So now what happened over time was there were some so-called Gaudiya Vaishnavas, and recently there's a Bollywood movie also made about this. Maharaja, that is the name of the movie. Basically, what happens is that there were some of these so-called spiritual leaders, and they said that actually, when we become devotionally receptive, then actually the Lord and His consorts enter into us. So a male spiritual leader will say that actually Krishna is entering into me, and they'll tell their female disciples, Radha is entering into you. And when we unite, it is not mundane, it is spiritual. We are not enjoying, Radha and Krishna are enjoying through us. And this was a complete perversion. And many people get misled by this. And the result of this is that it leads to, it's not just a cheap prestige, it is downright immorality being rationalized in the name of devotion. So this has become alarmingly widespread. And that's why from Bhaktisar Thakur time onwards, these ecstatic symptoms of bhakti, they were more or less respectfully retired upstairs. What do we mean by that? That respectfully retired upstairs means yes, these are exalted symptoms and we accept that these are possible. But we don't focus on them in our practice of bhakti. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu itself, there are other symptoms that are described. So there are some things which are easily imitable. I think Bhakti Thakur would say that what is the price of the tears of love of God? What is the price of tears of ecstasy? Disciples started thinking, it's just the price of one onion. so, so basically, that aspect of bhakti. So there are these imitable symptoms of devotion. There are if you see the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we talk about 6 characters of pure devotional service. But afterwards, there are symptoms of devotion that are described. And there are some which are imitable. So, for example, the ecstatic symptoms are to some extent imitable. But there are symptoms which are non-imitable. Say, for example, avyartha kalatu, not wasting time, constantly being engaged in Krishna's service. That is not possible unless somebody has authentic devotion. Then, namagani sadaruchi, samutkantha, being eager to glorify Krishna, being eager to hear about Krishna, being detached from material things. This we cannot make. If you don't have it, you can't make a show for a long time. So, from Bhaktisar Thakur onwards, the symptoms of advanced devotion that were emphasized were these more non-imitable symptoms. So, this way, that this is again the example of reason being rejected in the name of devotion. So, this can cause a lot of disruption in society. In the Bhakti tradition itself, reason is or intelligence is not to be exiled. Krishna says, in fact, that we should not see intelligence as separate from devotion. He says, Adhishyate cha yaimam dharmyam samvadamavayo jnana yagyena tenaham ishtasyamiti me matihi. So he says, we can worship Krishna with our intelligence. So just like we do puja with the arti lamp and with flowers, so we can worship Krishna with our intelligence. So for us within bhakti, studying, analyzing, reasoning, it doesn't have to be simply an intellectual activity. It's a devotional activity where when we have buddhi that is given to us by Krishna, we use it in Krishna's service. So of course, ultimately Krishna cannot be understood by rationality alone. But there is a difference. There is rational There is irrational, which is below reason, and then there is trans-rational. That when we say something is irrational, that means it can't stand the scrutiny of reason. If you examine it logically, it just makes no sense at all. Whereas when something is trans-rational, the scrutiny of reason can't stand before it. So in bhakti, there are many things that are reasonable. So, for example, the existence of the soul, the nature of the soul, the existence of God, the broad characteristics of God, all these are very much reasonable. So, in general, in theology, what is theology? Study of God. In theology, there are two aspects to it. There is rational theology and there is revelational theology. So, rational theology is that aspect of the philosophy and especially the nature of God that can be understood through reason. So, that God exists, that God is kind, that God is present in us, these can be inferred through reason, through various forms of reasoning. But that God is a bluish black cowherd boy who plays a flute and wears a peacock feather. There is no amount of reasoning that can lead us to that. Now, that is not illogical, that is a part of revelational theology. So, that is something, if God is really a person, every person will have their preferences. And those are features of their personality, and we accept that. So, Bhakti acknowledges that not everything about God can be understood through reason. But that does not mean reason has to be exiled for understanding. We go as far as reason goes, and then we go further. We go further. We don't let reason stop us, but we don't reject reason. So, the relationship of reason with devotion can be that the one extreme is rejection, the role of reason in devotion. One is rejection, the other is domination. If something does not make logical sense, I will never accept it. But the balance stage is utilization. To whatever extent we have been given buddhi, we have to use it. Tad viddhi pranipatena pariprashnena. We have buddhi, we need to use that buddhi. So utilization. Some people have a lot of intelligence, lot of analytical capacity. They will use that in Krishna's service. Some people may not be that analytical. Then whatever intelligence they have, they use in Krishna's service. But rationality needs to be used. So that's the first point. Within the bhakti tradition itself, there are safeguards to prevent devotion leading to disruption in the name of irrationality. What is the second one? Can you remember? Yes, insensitivity. So sometimes, in the name of devotion, what can happen is that when we start understanding the philosophy of bhakti, hey, this makes so much sense. We start practicing bhakti and we start becoming peaceful, some of our bad habits start going away, we start becoming more even tempered, we start becoming excited, hey, this is so good. And naturally we want to share it with others. And that is good. Enthusiasm is desirable. Prabhupada used the example that if we have been sick for a long time and we have finally found a medicine that works, and then we see somebody else sick with that same thing, we'll actually want to tell them, take this, you'll be cured. So Prabhupada said that when we do outreach is the word that is nowadays being used instead of preaching, because preaching has a little bit of a preachy connotation. Like, I'm sitting high above and I'm going to instruct all of you. So it's a very Christian word. So it did not have that much of a negative connotation in the 1960s, but nowadays it has a significantly negative connotation. Our devotees were doing tribal care. Initially they had tribal preaching center, they called it. Then they called it tribal outreach center. Now they call it tribal care center. So the idea is, when we are doing outreach, so it's good to be enthusiastic, but when we become over enthusiastic, then it can lead to problems. So when we are over enthusiastic, what happens is that we start becoming very judgmental about everyone. The Shastras tell us sarvopadhi vinirmuktam, that we should become bhakti should free us from all labels. But we start putting labels on everyone. No, you are a demigod worshipper, you are a Mayavadi, you are a mundane philanthropist, you are attached, you are this, you are that. Just we try to put everyone into convenient boxes. And by that, it's a very reductionistic way of looking at things. So when we can become judgmental about what people, their beliefs are, what they believe, and what their practices are. Now, what is the result of this? The result of this is that we can come off as very narrow minded. That uh, although our tradition is quite inclusive, in the sense that Krishna, there are multiple ways. There's Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyan Yoga, Bhakti Yoga. Krishna himself has created the system of the worship of many devatas. Now, of course, there is a ultimate reality. Krishna recommends us Sarvadharman Paritijya. But there's nowhere in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna condemns Karma Yoga. There is nowhere in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna condemns Jnana Yoga. There is nowhere in the Bhagavad Gita that Krishna condemns Dhyan Yoga. Arjuna says it is difficult. Now it's interesting, Krishna does not join Arjuna's condemnation. Krishna only says, yes, it is difficult. Abhyasena to kaunteya vairagyena cha brujyate. So he gives Abhyas and Vairagya are broad principles. Now, Abhyas and Vairagya can be required for Dhyan Yoga. Basically, it's like medicine. Whether you're taking Ayurveda or allopathy or naturopathy, there'll be Abhyas. Do some things, and Vairagya. Don't do some things. So when Krishna does not really join Arjuna in condemning or rejecting Dhyan Yoga. Krishna clearly and strongly recommends Bhakti Yoga. No doubt about it. But Krishna does not demean or dismiss any other path. So the Vedic tradition is quite inclusive. So, with respect to paths, there are some paths which are exclusive, exclusivist. Exclusivist means this is the only way. My way is the way to God, and if you're not following it, you're going to go to hell. And exclusivist, people sometimes become even extremist. So exclusivism is more in thought, extremism is in action. You see? Not only are you going to go to hell, we'll help you get there faster. Now, the opposite of that is pluralist. Now, modern Hinduism is often thought of as pluralist. That okay, whatever you want to believe, you can believe that. One such leader was asked, how many gods are there in India? So he said, as many people are there in India. So the idea is that not that everybody is God, but that everybody has their own conception of God, and whatever that conception, that is right for them. Now, pluralist is actually now as far as people having the right to believe what they want, then nobody can legislate or impose faith on anyone. So in that sense, people can believe what they want. But there's a difference between believing what we want and claiming that our belief is reality. So the pluralist and exclusivist themselves are all paths are right. If all paths are right, then somebody says only my path is right. Then that path will also be right. Isn't it? And if that path is right, then all paths can't be right. Did you get the logical contradiction? See, all paths are right. This is pluralism. If all paths are right, then the path which says only my path is right, that also has to be right. Isn't it? But if this is right, then this can't be right. So it is this pluralism is actually self-contradictory. So the actual Vedic teaching is more of inclusivism. Inclusivism means that there is one purpose, and there can be many paths toward that one purpose. That means what? That ultimately everybody, mama vartamanu vartante manushyaha partha sarvashaha. All people are on my path. Now everybody is in their own way trying to experience higher consciousness. They want to have a richer experience of life. They want to be happier. Now, some people, in pursuing higher consciousness, may actually be going down to lower consciousness. Like some people may explore higher consciousness through drugs. Now, they will go down to lower consciousness by that. But the point is that if we consider the top of a mountain to be spiritual consciousness, the bottom of the mountain to be material consciousness, then there can be many paths up the mountain. Now, this does not necessarily mean all paths are equal. Some path may be very rocky, some path may be very marshy, some paths may be very smooth. So there's a difference. But there can be many paths up the mountain. So there is one purpose, that is to go from material consciousness to spiritual consciousness. Prabhupada said the purpose is to develop love of God. And on that criteria, Prabhupada appreciated Jesus. He said he's our guru. So the idea is that we accept now that many paths can take one up the mountain, but that does not mean all paths. Some paths might just go round and round the mountain. Some paths may go only half the way up the mountain. Some paths may go down into valley from the mountain. Isn't it? So inclusivism is not the same as pluralism. So we understand that there are different paths which can help people grow to different degrees. So we are not meant to be exclusivist, although sometimes we can come off as exclusive. So when we become insensitive, then what happens is we come off as we are seen as intolerant, and then people just turn away from us. I don't want anything to do with these people. The lot of people become close to us because of our perceived intolerance. So this is something which Krishna himself warns we should avoid it. Krishna says in 326, Na buddhi bhedam janayed ajnanam karma sanginam joshayed sarva karmani vidwan yuktah samacharan. So Krishna is talking about two levels of people. There could be a teacher and there could be a seeker. So Krishna says this person at the higher level is wise and detached or engaged, connected. So Vidwan and Yuktaha. And this person is ignorant and attached. So clearly one person is a higher level than the other. Now we may say somebody, it's like we go out for Harinam Kirtan and somebody just comes and joins. Hey, this is so wonderful. Somebody may say, I was going for a party, but dancing here gave me more happiness. And we say, wonderful. Come tomorrow morning at 4:30. And come every day at 4:30. And now they have some interest, some curiosity. But what happens? Sometimes people at a particular level, and from here we expect them to take a high jump right up to extremely high level. And some people may try the high jump, but if they can't do it, then they go further down. They try something and they start thinking it's impractical, and then just go away from it. So instead, what Krishna says is, don't do this. Na buddhi bhedam janayet. Don't disturb people. Instead, what he says, joshayet sarva karmani vidwan yuktah samachara. He says, create a pathway by which, step by step, gradually, people can come to that level. So, okay, what is it that you can do? So it's like there are two things over here. For this to happen, we appreciate where they are at. And then we elevate them. That they may be at a lower level, but they are at least looking upwards. They are looking for a way to move upwards. So we appreciate that. And then we elevate them. Now, even in elevating, there can be different staircases. There can be some staircase which is like very steep, but it takes you very fast. Some staircase is very gentle, it may take some time. But as long as people are going up, we can appreciate. In Srila Prabhupada's times, we see that there is his full-time disciples. He gave them very strong instructions to them, and they left everything for serving him. But then there were also the life members. Now, the life members, many of them did a lot of service to Prabhupada. But hardly any of them actually became initiated disciples. Very few of them committed to sadhana necessarily in terms of a particular number of rounds. But if you see the letter that Prabhupada wrote to them, the conversation that Prabhupada had, it was very warm with them, very appreciative of them. Prabhupada was not guilting them constantly. Why are you not chanting 16 rounds? It like we all say that, the Prabhupada would say that my Guru Maharaj pushed me, I am pushing you, you push others. We are a pushing parampara. Now everybody needs to be pushed. But while pushing, we have to watch. By my pushing, are people going toward Krishna or are they getting pushed away from Krishna? So if we are insensitive, we end up unnecessarily alienating people. Hmm. Unnecessarily alienating people. Now, some of you may know that in America, there is emerging politician Tulsi Gabbard. So she is very highly respected, at least in the conservative circles, and she's quite charismatic. Now, she's a disciple of Siddha Swarupananda, who was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. Now, Siddha Swarupananda was actually um, he had he was himself a guru before. Then he came with his disciples to ISKCON, but then he found it difficult to work with the current ISKCON leaders at that time. And in his interactions with Prabhupada, Prabhupada appreciated and accommodated him. But eventually, what happened after Prabhupada departed, things went in such a way that he just, that, now what, I don't want to go into the exact history, but the point was that he left ISKCON. Whether he left ISKCON, he was driven out of ISKCON, whatever. And now he and his followers have done a huge amount of preaching. In fact, his Western preaching is actually more than the Western preaching of all of ISKCON right now, through his followers. And he is teaching Gaudiya Vaishnavism. He appreciates Prabhupada, or his followers appreciate Prabhupada and they read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita as it is. So was it necessary to create that fracture? We could have had that, Tulsi Gabbard may become a big minister or even the president of America in future. She's a future candidate. So we could have had somebody who could have been ISKCON devotee. But there are some people who need more space. Now, we can give them that space. Now, that does not mean they can do whatever they want. But when space is given, there are many influential people who can connect and support in different ways. With George Harrison, what did Prabhupada do? Initially, Prabhupada told George Harrison that make songs about Krishna. And he started doing that. And we know about the success story. But there are always the downside of it. His My Sweet Lord and songs like that became immensely popular. But then when he started doing devotional songs, what happened is, you see, he is a professional. And if he is a professional musician, people expect a professional product from him. Isn't it? So he had Madison Square Avenue, one of the biggest venues in New York in America. There, he started telling his audience, chant Hare Krishna. And he was like a superstar at that time, probably the most popular person in the world at that time. The audience started throwing bottles and onions and tomatoes and eggs at him. And all his reviews started tanking. And people started saying that, this George Harrison was such a great talent, but he has got involved with this Hare Krishna cult. And the world has lost such a great musical talent because of that. Then he came and met Prabhupada. Now, to understand this, to understand what is the problem over here. Now, India won the T20 World Cup, but before that we got in the finals. And we lost in the finals. So, imagine Virat Kohli or Rohit Sharma were a devotee. And India has lost the World Cup final and very badly lost it. And then, after in the post-match interview, ask, okay, why do you think India lost? It's a win, loss, everything is temporary. Just chant Hare Krishna and be happy. Now, you cannot imagine a worse anti-preaching in India than this. Isn't it? They're telling people to chant Hare Krishna and driving them away from chanting Hare Krishna. Because if you are a cricketer, you have to perform as a cricketer. And then in addition to that, you can talk about your spirituality. So the thing that happens is that, so then George Harrison met Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, he said, Prabhupada, for every one, I'm doing what you told me to do. But for every one person that I'm bringing to Krishna, I feel there are 100 people who are going away from Krishna. And Prabhupada became green. And Prabhupada said, use your intelligence. He said, do it in such a way that people are attracted. So then he started writing normal songs, the kind he was writing before, and started interspersing some devotional songs in between. So then people started saying, oh, thank God that George Harrison has come out of the clutches of this cult. And he continued on. Now he was quite open about his devotion. If we read Chant Hare Krishna and Be Happy, the books like that, but he was discreet. So the point here is that we cannot be insensitive in the sense that what are people's concerns, what are people's expectations. We need to be aware of that. Now we can't always address all of them. That is true. So when you're saying being sensitive does not mean we care only for people. You have to also care for their elevation, and sometimes that means speaking certain things which are not really palatable for people. But that balance has to be found. So Krishna says in 17:15 in the Bhagavad Gita that it talks about discipline of speech. Anudvegakaram vakyam satyam priyahitam chet. Swadhyayabhyasanam chaiva vanmayam tapa uchyate. Now this can be understood as we need to be sensitive and we need to be sensible. So to be sensitive means anudvegakaram vakyam. Our speech should be at least non-agitating. Preferably, it can be pleasing. Now we can't always speak the pleasing things because sometimes the truth hurts. Now sometimes truth may be bitter, but the bitter truth also doesn't have to be spoken bitterly, isn't it? So you can say it's like a funnel. At least try to be non-agitating. If possible, try to be pleasing also. Then Krishna also says, be helpful and be truthful. So there are many truths that can be spoken, but not all truths have to be spoken at the same time. Say a couple is married for 30 years, and on the 30th wedding anniversary, the husband says to the wife, today I will give you a gift that will change your life. It will help you to become. Today I'll tell you all the faults that I have observed in the last 30 years. By knowing these faults, you can become a better person. Now, that may be the last wedding anniversary. So, there are many truths that can be spoken, but the first thing is it helpful? So, Krishna says, Satyam, but also Hitam. Satyam and Hitam. So, among the truths that can be spoken, which are the truths that are going to be helpful for the person? So, we want it to be a balance of being sensitive and sensible. If only we are sensitive, then we will become headless. In the name of being sensitive, we'll start thinking falsity, which is not required. On the other hand, if we are only sensible, then we will become heartless. So, insensitivity can cause a lot of disruption. And our Shastras itself tell us there are many, many references for being sensitive. So, that brings us to the last part. What is the last part? Yes, we can be irresponsible in our social roles. And that irresponsibility can be in the name of devotion. So, basically, there is a difference between renunciation and frustration. I had one experience, and Radheshapur has apparently had a similar experience. Maybe to the same boy who had come. But anyway, I was in Pune. I was sitting in the guest reception, and one boy came. He said, "What is the process of joining here?" He said, "You want to become a brahmachari?" He said, "Yeah." Okay. He says, "I had not seen him come to the temple. Did not seen him serious." So I asked him, "Are you serious about becoming brahmachari?" He says, "On Sunday I'll be deciding." So it was Thursday. I said, "What is going to happen on Sunday?" He said, "I have proposed to a girl." If she says no, I'll become a brahmachari. So now there is a fundamental difference between renunciation and frustration. So there is two things in this world. There are many things to enjoy. There is the desire to enjoy, and there is the availability of the enjoyment. So basically, what happens is when there is frustration and when there is renunciation. In frustration, the desire is there, the availability is not there. In renunciation, the availability may be there, but the desire is not there. So, frustration is not a qualification for renunciation. Frustration may make one start exploring spirituality. But afterwards, one has to develop positive spiritual attraction. If one does not develop that positive spiritual attraction, by when that spiritual attraction leads to a higher desire, that higher desire becomes stronger, then the lower desire starts declining. So we may have desire, but at least even if the desire is present, we should not have the desire for the desire. That means desires come up within me, but I am not trying to increase the desires. I'm not trying to fuel the desires. Krishna says, na kama kami. Don't be a desirer of desire. Desire comes in apuryamana machala pratishtam samudramapa pravishanti advat. Tadvat kamayam pravishanti sarve sashanti mapnoti na kama kama. So he gives the example of a river flowing into an ocean. So the river is flowing in, but the water does not overflow out. Like that, desires may arise. When we say be free from desire, does not necessarily mean there is no agitation. Krishna later says that as long as we have a body, desire will be there. Shaknoti haivaya sodu prakshari vimokshana. Kama krodhodbhavam vegam sayukta sukhinara. Certain level of desires are just biological desires. They'll arise, but we don't indulge in those desires. We don't look forward to those desires. We don't feed and fan those desires. So, renunciation is very different from frustration. So, many times when we talk about devotional renunciation, it is not so much giving up responsibility. It is actually taking up a higher responsibility. It is taking up a higher responsibility. If our focus is only on giving up responsibility, then when we practice bhakti also, there are responsibilities to be taken up. If we are turning away from the world because there are so many problems in the world, then the result will be okay, you come to bhakti. When you're practicing bhakti, even you're in the brahmacharya ashram, even you're living in the temple, still there are problems everywhere. So if we run away from the world because the responsibilities there are leading to problems, we come to a renounced order, and there are problems. Then where are we going to run away after that? Isn't it? So if somebody is irresponsible, what happens? Three things can happen. We'll conclude with this point. Irresponsible is, at one level, there is disruption in the immediate circles. Immediate circles. So, there may be family, there may be others who are dependent. We cannot just abandon those. I met one devotee. I knew him to be a firebrand preacher, very, very confrontational, very dismissive kind of preacher. So he introduced me to one of his assistants. And he says, this devotee is so sincere. His wife refused to become a devotee, so he divorced her. Now, I was not just shocked, the shock square and shock cube. So, why? See, first of all, we are not meant to break families. It's one thing if somebody is unmarried and chooses to become brahmachari. But if somebody is married, even Prabhupada himself did not abandon his wife and children. Because he was married, he said, if I had not been married, I would have immediately joined the mission. So that it's a shocking. Prabhupada continued on and then eventually renounced. He tried to do preaching as much as he could while in the Grihastha. So I found it as a shocking cube. Why? First of all, like breaking up dharma, breaking up family. That's to think that is a good thing. That is itself bad. and to see breaking up family as a sign of seriousness of devotion. Hmm? That is even worse. And then to broadcast that. you know, See, generally, whatever the leader glorifies, everybody tries to follow that, isn't it? So, do we want to glorify that? Now, sometimes, for whatever reason, sometimes families may break. That's unfortunate. It's tragic in some ways, but sometimes it's unavoidable. But we don't want to ever glorify that. We don't want devotion to be used as an excuse for doing that. So, in the immediate circles, there is disruption because of that. Hmm. So, we don't want to be irresponsible. But beyond that, what happens is in the broader society, the perception is created. What is the perception? The perception is that we are escapists. There was a survey done in America. In the Western world, our movement went to various stages. So initially, we had devotees everywhere. They were doing kirtan, distributing books. So there were some surveys done of how many Hare Krishna do you think are there? So the count that people gave was between 50 to 100 times more than the actual number of devotees, because we are so visible. Mhm. But then they asked, "What do you think about the Hare Krishnas?" So there many replies came. Some people, these are cultists and these are that, but those were like a fringe minority people, those who were very anti-cult campaigners. But one significant opinion that was there in America that came in that survey was, "What do you think about the Hare Krishnas?" A jolly bunch of impractical people. They're jolly, they're singing and dancing, but they have nothing to do with the real world. Now we say this is not the real world, that is the real world. You know, that is not going to work for them. So they are not at that level. We have to make sense to them at the level that they are at. So we start being seen of as escapists. We start seeing as somebody whom we just don't have much to do with. Now, fortunately, if you see, our movement's reputation has changed. That in the past we were seen as, to some extent, people who, when somebody becomes a devotee, the young boy, they'll become brahmachari. So when a family, they just become disconnected from the whole society. But now things are changing. That we are seen as a respected organization. ISKCON brand itself is fairly respected, and somehow monks have become cool now. So, many of our devotees are writing books. So even most of us, we were earlier published self-publishing books, but now we are going to mainstream publishers. And not only mainstream publishers are accepting the books, they are insisting that the monk's picture be on the cover. And even if that monk is not a very well-known monk, still, that is a monk. We want this book is written by a monk. So somehow cultural perceptions have changed. There are many reasons. I would say that one of the reasons is we have been seen as contributing socially. The devotees, so some devotees have got into self-help and they have given wisdom that makes sense to people and adds value to the life where they are at. We have done projects like, say, giving food in charity or other projects which seep that we are doing something valuable. So whatever the reason is, my point is that yes, there will be renunciates and there will be people who should take renunciation, but that should not become a license. Just somebody has trouble, I just want to leave everything. It should not be an escape way. Bhakti, I'll conclude this with one last point. Bhakti is meant to be an expressway to Krishna. It is not meant to be an escape way from problems. Mhm. If you're looking for an escape way from problems, actually, there are a lot of problems on the expressway to Krishna. If we are serious about if we are serious about serving Krishna, if we are serious about our relationship with Krishna, then in our sadhana, in our seva, there will be problems. And Prabhupada said that, you know, our seriousness and our bhakti can be seen by how much responsibility we take up in our service. Now, doing some small service, okay, serve prasadam. No, okay, we serve prasadam and we go away. But if we say, okay, take responsibility to make sure the prasadam serving happens properly, that responsibility will engage our mind much more. Because otherwise, we just serve, even while you're serving, we don't even look at who is serving, we're thinking about other things. But then if you take responsibility, okay, if this person is not available, what do I do? If this food is become short, what do I do? So taking responsibility is actually a way to fix our mind on Krishna. Among the various kinds of dhyan, there is Rupa dhyan, there is Nama dhyan, Lila dhyan, that Rupa Goswami talks about. Seva dhyan is probably the most accessible form of dhyan. So when we take responsibility, what happens is we can do Seva dhyan. And why is Seva dhyan required? Because in this world there are problems. Seva dhyan means when the problems come, how will I deal with the problems? Satatam kirtayanto ma yatantasya drudhavrataha. So those who are internally so pure that they can constantly glorify Krishna. Why do they need to be determined? Why do they need great determination for serving Krishna? Because even when there is internal purity, there are no internal obstacles. Still, the nature of the world means there will be many external obstacles. And to face those obstacles, we need determination. So the point is, if we become irresponsible in the name of devotion, then not only can we create disruption outside with people, but even in the devotee community, there can be disruption, isn't it? See, if somebody is taken responsible role in a particular place, if somebody is kitchen in charge and food is short, tell them, Prabhu, the prasad is less. Chant Hare Krishna and be happy. See, one aspect of irresponsibility in our service is somebody comes with a practical problem and we give a philosophical solution. No, we can give a philosophical perspective, but then we also have to give a practical solution. Till the solution works out, okay, sometimes solutions take time. Until that time, we need a philosophical perspective. So if we only start giving philosophical solutions and nothing practical, then what is happening is we are being irresponsible. If we start off and start doing big projects, somebody says we'll start a multi-crore temple, but we have a small community. Where are we going to get faith from? Where are we going to get funds from? Have faith in Krishna. Don't be a doubter. And that is not doubt. That is being responsible. When Prabhupada started the temples in Vrindavan and Mayapur, he knew that there's already religious places, and we are new. It's unlikely that people are going to give donations at that time. And our movement is also new. So we're getting funds for construction, but Prabhupada had long-term vision. So Prabhupada, while building the temples itself, created MVT, the Mayapur Vrindavan Trust. So we will have places like more like residential places, like hotels, restaurants, where people can come and stay, and that would be source of revenue for the temples. So in the name of faith, Prabhupada was not irresponsible. So one aspect of being responsible is that when somebody comes to us with practical problems, then what we need to give them is, we can give them a philosophical perspective. Okay, this particular thing is happening over here. It's very disturbing very much. Okay, how do I make sense of it? Philosophical perspective is important, but along with that, there has to be practical solutions. So in that way, what will happen is we will ensure that there is not much disruption. See, if somebody is being troubled by some other devotee, and that devotee is domineering, is got a lot of trouble, then that devotee has to be told, or maybe that devotee has to be given a service which is a different service. Say suppose somebody is short-tempered. Now some devotees may have anger issues from the past, and their anger may have gone down, but still it may be above the acceptable level of anger, isn't it? So now if somebody is very short-tempered, and you put them in charge of devotee care, now, and devotees come and Prabhu, this devotee spoke so harshly to me, this devotee did this. And we tell that devotee, Trunadapi sunichena, tarorapi saituna. So, no, at that time, we have to take some practical action. We don't want to condemn that devotee. There are everybody with conditioning. But that devotee needs to be given some other service, isn't it? If some devotee has too much attachment to prasadam, then maybe that devotee should not be in charge of Mahaprasad. Isn't it? Otherwise, there will be no Mahaprasad left for the guests. So sometimes practical things also have to be done. There is now, so within our, so now here, how is it related to irresponsible? If somebody is in a responsible position and they feel that I don't want to deal with any problems. Oh, okay, this person is creating problems, but you don't create a problem for me. You just learn to tolerate. Now, tolerance is important, but tolerance doesn't mean that wrongs keep going on and let them go on. So, being responsible means that if we take a position, then whatever challenges come with that position, we need to be ready to take up those challenges and deal with those problems and come up with reasonable solutions. So, otherwise, even in the devotee community, there can be disruption. Now, why is this happening? Why is this happening? Many people, many times, this happened in America. I don't hear it done in India till now. What has happened is in India, we already have so many devotees that if some devotees go away, nobody even notices. Or people don't care. But in America, we don't have so many devotees. So they did a survey of uh, of many people who left bhakti, and asked what were the reasons. And generally, the insider view is they're insincere. They couldn't follow the standards, and that's why they left. But the actual survey, what it showed was that they felt we were dealt badly with by devotees. That, some devotees dealt badly with us and others just didn't care for us. So that's why we felt that we don't want to belong to this community. So now, then, when actually the leaders were talked with, the leaders thought that we are telling you just to learn philosophy, we all have to become tolerant. But that's not the only part of the philosophy. There are many other parts of the philosophy. Isn't it? Krishna did not tell Arjuna, oh, Kauravas have done so much atrocities to you. I told you Matra Sparshas to counter, tolerate it. No, there are times that changes have to be made. So, otherwise, even within the devotee community, there can be disruption. But if you actually understand Shastra and follow Shastra, then we will act in such a way that we will take responsibility. If we can't take responsibility, we will gracefully step away from the responsibility and let somebody else take up the responsibility who can actually deal with the issues. And that way, the disruption in the devotee community can be minimized. Now, still, this world is going to be dukkhalaya, and we can't avoid that. So, never is it that there will be no problems, but the distress in the world, there is some level of unavoidable distress, and there is avoidable distress. Or let's not use the word we'll use, slightly different. So, there is irreducible distress. Say, for example, birth, old age, disease, death. This is irreducible distress. But there is reducible distress. This comes from the Trivedatapa, the Adhyatmik, Adhibhautik, Adhidaivik. We can decrease this distress. Now, if we learn to eat more healthy food, the Adhyatmik klesh can be decreased. It cannot go away. We'll all have some diseases. If we all learn to care for each other, become more sensitive, the Adhibhautik klesh can be decreased. If we take a proper precautions, the nature will always have its problems, but we can minimize the Adhyatmik klesh. So it is our responsibility. We have to learn to tolerate. There will always be some unavoidable distress. But this avoidable distress, it is our responsibility to deal with this, to reduce it. Now, of course, it is our tolerance to accept it, to live with it. So, but to say that, to consider, there are two extremes, to consider all distress to be irreducible. Every problem comes, this is just the nature of the material world. If some guest comes to our house and they say, Prabhu, I'm feeling cold. What to do? This world is dukkhalaya. Well, I don't know whether this world is dukkhalaya. Your house is dukkhalaya. Isn't it? So this avoidable distress, we should avoid it. So, on the other hand, is to think that all distress is reducible. That you can come to a utopia where there'll be no problems in our life. That is not going to happen. Now, when people have this idea that all distress is reducible, they actually multiply the distress. No, I was in Canada and I stayed at one devotee's home. So the husband is a marketing agent for a big company, but he also is a priest. He learns slokas and he does marriage ceremonies. And his wife is an attorney. She's in family law. Now, family law is just a polite word for divorce. That's the primary thing. So they're joking. We are the real power couple. People come to him to get married. They come to me to get separated. But the Mataji was telling me sometimes people come for like utterly trivial reasons. In the West, there is this whole principle called the whole policy called no fault divorce. That is, no, you don't have to give any reason. They're just incompatible, and no fault of anyone. It's like you. If sometimes we take a phone contract. Okay, I have 6 months. I want to be with this company. And in some liberal countries, it is easier to get out of a marriage than it is to get out of a phone contract. That's how easy they have made it. It's terrible. So anyway, so this brother was telling me that sometimes people come with such strange ideas. So reasons for divorce. So one woman had come, a Canadian woman. She said that, okay, I want to separate. What is the reason? And she said, no, my husband and I can't agree on the AC temperature in our home. Now, there are so many people who don't have a AC in their home. There are so many people who don't even have a home. Now, she said, you really want that? This is the reason? She said, actually, I believed that he is my dream partner. He's my Mr. Right. And if he were my soulmate, then our body temperature should be synced together. Now, of course, there can always be the reality that there may be many other reasons, and that's just the reason that somebody is giving. But the fact that somebody thinks such a frivolous reason is an acceptable reason. So there are no perfect situations in the world. There are no perfect things in the world. So if we expect that all problems will be reducible, that's not. So we need to tolerate some problems, tolerate what is irreducible, but we need to mitigate what is reducible. And being responsible means to know, okay, what is it that I need to tolerate and what is it that I should mitigate. Mitigate means counter correct it. So in this way, devotion, we can prevent unnecessary disruption and we can move steadily and smoothly toward Krishna through the practice of our bhakti. So I'll summarize what I discussed. Broadly, we talked about disruptive devotion today and how it can be prevented. So 3 parts. What is the first part? It can be irrational, especially in our approach with God. And there I talked about in religion in general, there could be claims of faith healing and there could be radicalism. So where people send their intelligence on an exile. And in the Vedic tradition, there is this whole semi-God, isn't it? I am God. And the result of that is what? There is no higher taste. Because worshipping some so-called God is not going to give us higher taste. And that's why we have this curious phenomenon that religion is increasing in India, but materialism is also increasing. Then we talked within the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition itself, as we talked about Sahajiyaism. So in Sahajiyaism, I talked about 3 things. First is that somebody has some supernatural experiences. Somebody says, I saw Krishna winking at me, Krishna came in my dream. Then we have to evaluate. If it's favorable, it's okay, but keep it private, don't publicize it. If it's unfavorable, that means we start using it to say that I am a special devotee, therefore I don't need to practice bhakti. Normal rule, that's not good. Then there is imitation of ecstatic symptoms, where somebody claims to have certain things, so by which they can get prestige in society. We talk about this pretense of pregnancy, that a woman may do that just to get some attention and affection. And then lastly, we talked about rascal leela, where somebody misuses the idea of avesh. Then I talked about The second part, insensitive. So when we are insensitive, what happens is we disturb and alienate people. Like somebody is here and we are here. So we try to get them to go all the way up, but instead they can't and they go further down. So we don't want to be extremist. We need to create step by step path by that they can gradually move upwards. So being sensitive means understanding their level and guiding them according to their level. So we talked about how speech needs to be both sensitive at one side and sensible on the other side. So we discussed about how it needs to be non-agitating and pleasing, anudvegakaram and priyam. And similarly, it needs to be hitam, helpful, and then truthful. So this way, what will happen is, if we go towards one extreme, we'll become headless. Go to the other extreme, will become heartless. And by this, potential devotees may go away. Even devotees themselves may feel troubled by insensitivity. And lastly, we talked about irresponsible. Irresponsible with respect to our responsibility. I talk about difference between renunciation and frustration. It is they're significantly different. The desire is there, but the availability is not there. That is frustration. Whereas renunciation is there, the availability is there, but desire is not there. Desire and availability, talked about it. And then, so with respect to renunciation, it is something which has to come gradually, and then we can talk about how bhakti is not so much about giving up responsibility, but it is about taking up higher responsibility. So taking up higher responsibility means that we take up the responsibility to serve Krishna, and then responsibility in our service. We talked about how if a practical problem comes up, then what is required? Yes, we can give a philosophical perspective, but also we have to give a practical solution to it. Otherwise, if you are only going to give a philosophical perspective, then that's also okay, but then we should not be in the responsible position. So in this way, we can ensure that our devotion doesn't become unnecessary disruptive. We talk about distress. There is irreducible distress, and that needs to be tolerated. But there is reducible distress, and that needs to be mitigated. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the wonderful another blockbuster session. I have two questions. So first question is, we see, as you were saying, sensitive in preaching. And we see how in the Western world, Prabhupada preached in the beginning. Then Prabhupada disciples were preaching. Now many Indian devotees who are very close to us also, they are going traveling. And you have been traveling since last 10 years. Now, what we can expect or hope that how things can work in America, whether it is going to really, we can create some revolution there. Our devotees from India were preaching, number one. Second question is about you were saying about Tulsi Gabbard's spiritual master. He was part of ISKCON now. So what special thing he did compared to our ISKCON? Because in ISKCON also we are preaching, we are going out of the way. And what was so special about his preaching strategies this morning?
Okay. Both these questions are meant to get me into trouble. This is a disruptive devotion. Well, not necessarily, but two things. Regarding the first, basically, there is a fundamental difference between the culture in the West and the culture in the East. Eastern culture is not just India, but China also, Russia also. It's generally much more horizontal. There's authority and there's a subordinate. So an authority figure is respected. In the West, it's much more horizontal. There's always still authority is there, but it is not that much horizontal. It's not that vertical. It's much more horizontal. It's a much more egalitarian culture. So now, when people came at the time of 1960s and 70s to Prabhupada, in the West also, the culture was significantly hierarchical at that time. You know. So many of them grew up in families where there is some significant level of discipline and authority was there. But over a period of time, they found that the authority was untrustworthy. They were not having stand integrity, or they didn't walk their talk for various reasons. So they rejected the authority. But when they found Srila Prabhupada, a person with impeccable integrity, then they were able to subordinate themselves. But now, the people who are coming to us, is it 2024, they're born 2000, or whatever, 1980s, 1990s, there are millennials, there are Zoomers, and all those generations are there. But those people have grown up in a very egalitarian way. So a very instructive approach does not work for them. So they get alienated very quickly by that. And now, how much is the hierarchy integral to bhakti? That is a question that requires deliberation. There are different opinions about it. At one level, we say Yasya Prasadat Bhagavad Prasado. We need the mercy of the spiritual master. But we have within our tradition also, say, examples of Narad Muni and Dhruv Maharaj. You know, Narad Muni gave a particular instruction. I said, just go back home. Narad Muni said, Dhruva said, I can't do this. And Narad Muni didn't say, you don't know who I am? I am the son of Brahma. I am the guru of such great people. You obey me. No, they negotiated basically. Okay, if you can't do this, then do this. And so it's not just in the tradition, it's only vertical. Yes, there are examples of say Ramacharya telling some of the disciples, just leave everything. Prabhupada telling his disciples to go to London or go somewhere else, and they're doing that. But there are examples. Tamal Krishna Maharaj wanted to go, and he got completely fried up with management in India, in Mumbai. Nothing was moving forward. And he said, Prabhupada, I want to preach. So he went to America. The Prabhupada didn't want him to go to America, but he said, Prabhupada, I just can't do this. And he almost insisted. Prabhupada reluctantly allowed it. But then the Radha Mudabas party came out of that. So he negotiated with the spiritual master. And there's a letter of Prabhupada in 1975. He writes to one of his senior disciples. He said that, what is it? Now that you are a senior person, I cannot give you instructions. I can only give you suggestions. So there are different modes. So that is open to question. But in India, the way bhakti has been presented, in India still we have that hierarchical culture. So this mode of operation works. Now, of course, in India also, there's a large number of people who do not come because we are too hierarchical. But India's population is so high that even if those people are not coming, there are still many people coming. So now in the West, our attempts to reach to people have been tough. Now there will always be exceptions. You know, there are people who may be already very spiritually evolved, just born in that country for some reason, and they just, in spite of whatever upbringing, culture, they still take bhakti. That is possible, but those will be rare. So right now, Western outreach is a big challenge. There are some levels of success. Different devotees are trying different things, and that's how some of us are doing yoga. Some devotees are like preaching through yoga. Some are going more through like mindfulness and retreats and things like that. So more like a soft landing for people to come to bhakti. Now, right now, the problem is threefold for us over there. There are basically in the West, one problem is there are no or very few Western devotees. Then there is another problem is there are few full-time devotees. Because now there are mostly Indians over there. And the Indians who go there, who go to America are very successful, very career-oriented. That's how they crack through all the competition and go there. they are not interested in becoming full-time devotees. Very few of them are. So we have temples which were built when we had lots of devotees, and now we don't have people to take care of those temples. There are some temples where if you go for the morning program, there are more deities than there are devotees. You know, it's unfortunate, but it happens. So we have very few devotees over there. So especially full-time devotees. There are Indians who are becoming devotees, but and they are very dedicated in their own way. But what has happened is that when we were largely serving the counterculture, we took temples or we took land. We got temples in the place where those people from the counterculture were living. But often now those areas have become high crime areas, and Indians don't want to take their families over there. Or if they go, you don't want to go at 4 o'clock in the morning. So the location is not ideal. So that's why there's acute shortage of devotees over there. Many times Indians go there as paid pujaris. Many people from Mayapur go there. And then there is a whole place where the pujaris who go there, they stay there for some time until they get a green card. After they get a green card, then they leave the pujari service and they get married to someone and they take up jobs. There's one place called New Orleans, where it's like you go to anywhere, a typical cab driver is a devotee. The typical petrol pump person is a devotee. They're all people who had gone to the temples as employees and they have left. So basically, full-time devotees, it's difficult to have them over there. And the third issue over there right now is related to the second one only, but that it is that you could say that there is a lack of guidance. Because what happened is there are many first generation Prabhupada disciples. First generation Prabhupada disciples are there, but they have become relatively old. And most of the devotees who are coming to the temples, they are grahasthas. Now the Prabhupada disciples might have been grahasthas, but they lived a missionary life. Missionary life means that they never had careers, they never had like responsible, successful lives. So for them to guide grahastha devotees becomes very difficult. So devotees are inspired and doing things, but sometimes they don't get the guidance that they can look up to. They respect the Prabhupada disciples. I'm not talking about all Prabhupada disciples. But so there's almost like imagine if you come to a temple and there is no one, say you are 30, 35 years old, and there are a number of other people who are 30, 35 years old, and everywhere, and the only preacher who is there is a 75-year-old. There's nobody at the age of 50, nobody at the age of 60, nobody at 45, nobody at the 60, 75, 65, whatever. So the big gap. So now at one level, visiting preachers have been serving this gap. Now, of course, another thing is that as our movement has come to the next generation, preaching also is a little more rational, little more systematic. So that gap is being served by full-time preachers, by visiting preachers. Now, our youth preaching that is being planned, that is primarily at this stage to address the shortfall of full-time devotees. The full-time devotees doesn't necessarily mean brahmacharis. They can be grahasthas also, but they stay near the temple and they take up responsibility in the temple. And this is where Radheshampur's service attitude has been immensely appreciated. Like, initially, there was some concern. These Indian brahmacharis are going to attack America, ISKCON. So many brahmacharis are coming. What are they coming for? There was a little concern. But recently, so over 10 years, I have been going there. I've become good friends with many of the leaders. Several of the leaders, some of them who are also very, very careful and also a little critical. They appreciate Radheshampur said that, I want to ensure that every temple has at least 10 to 20 devotees who can take up responsibility in the temples. There are Prabhupada disciples who are 65, 70, 75. One temple where there's a 75-year-old Prabhupada disciple, and he is doing all the worship of the deity. He is one of the leaders over there, and he's very strong that deities should not be served by paid pujaris. So paid pujaris can come, but he doesn't want it. Now, he shouldn't be exhausting himself so much. So that service attitude in terms of providing devotees, that is something which is very laudable, and that is being appreciated widely. So now this, how are we targeting this? This youth preaching right now is primarily for Indians. There are Indian youth who go from, so we have a lot of experience in reaching out to Indian youth, decades of experience our youth preachers have. And more or less the same model is being replicated over there for Indians. And the plan is, now this has already started bearing results. There are several temples where there are some temples which have already provided some facility for devotees to, devotees are going to colleges or working, like we have our yogas and our youth centers, voice centers, provided in the temple only, and then there are people are taking up a lot of services. So it is a very appreciative for that. So at this level, things are moving and they're moving significantly fast. So it's the same Indians over there, highly successful. Now, whether they will become full-time devotees or not, if the preaching keeps going on, they may go to another place where they get a job, but others will come and things will go on. So at least the temples will be taken care of. And of course, they will preach. Because that it's not just taking care of temples. One part of taking care of temple is preaching also. Now, with respect to Western devotees, it's still a significant challenge. So there are the the likelihood of how things may work is that those people who have stayed some years in America, maybe they went for PhD, they're there 5 years, 10 years, they also get somewhat more familiarized with the American culture. Mhm. So they may eventually be able to connect with Americans. We have a few Americans coming even now. There will always be exceptions who will come, but so it's going to happen gradually. And have you, many of you may have heard of this phenomenon called ABCD. ABCD is basically American born confused Deshi. So those kids, the devotee kids or Indian kids who are born in America, they say they are like coconuts. Coconuts means brown from outside, white from inside. So, so in terms of skin color, they are brown, but in terms of the upbringing and the culture, they are quite Americanized. So, interestingly, many of them are appreciative of bhakti. They may not be practicing bhakti at the same level of commitment as initiated devotees or whatever, but they are appreciative of. They want to practice. They want to share in their own way. So one hope for our movement is that these they can act as a bridge. Hmm. In London, this is happening to some extent. They're also getting a lot of Indians, but they're also getting a lot of Indians who are born and brought up in London. And slowly, they're also attracting local people. So I would say it's going to be it's going to take a few years for things to happen. But the second level, in terms of providing devotees for taking care of temple and for reaching out for doing some outreach, in some college outreach as well as temple responsibilities, that has already been spectacularly successful. A lot more needs to be done, but it's a very systematic plan. And I think overall, when boundaries are there, there is concern that, say, if a more vertical kind of preaching may alienate people who need a more horizontal approach. So there is some discussion about the demarcation of boundaries, and if Western people come through our youth outreach, should we be cultivating them? Should some Western devotees be cultivating them? And on what basis can that be decided? So there are discussions going on, but Western outreach can also happen over a period of time. At this stage, it's more that we want to tap. These are among the most, those who go to America are among the most talented and dedicated Indians. If they become devotees, they can do extraordinary amount of work. It's interesting, in America, Indians are the wealthiest minority. Hmm. Among Indians, they use the word Indians, but most of them are Hindus. Some Muslims are also there, but mostly Hindus. And in the American political circles, Indians are considered the model minority. Model minority means that if all immigrants to America were like Indians, America would be spectacularly successful. America would not have any problems of harmony or integration or whatever. So Indians are law-abiding, tax-paying, family responsibility taking, and so Indians are highly successful, and that's because they're talented, because they're dedicated, and they become devotees. Then that itself, they can each one of them can do a lot of work. And who knows what Krishna's plan is? Maybe some of those will eventually lead to a significant rejuvenation in Western outreach also. So that Western outreach can mean outreach to Westerners, or it can mean outreach in the West. So right now, it is a Western outreach. What we are doing is outreach in the West. But it's primarily to Indians, but it's a part of a multi-stage plan. So it will happen with time. Okay. Now, the second question is a bit complex about what I have not really studied Suddhaswara. I met there are a couple of his followers whom I met, and everywhere there's problems. So this particular devotee, he got burned by some of his followers, and then he was like he was not in that group also, not because he had heard so much criticism of ISKCON. He didn't want to go to ISKCON also. Then somehow he heard my classes online, and whenever I go to Salt Lake City, he comes and meets me. So very intelligent person. He's a yoga teacher and he's cultivating his own group. But broadly, I feel that when devotees wanted to try certain things, they gave them space to try those things. So, like I talk the vertical and the horizontal, a more horizontal kind of outreach. What would that mean? There's a conversation between Prabhupada and Allen Ginsberg, where Allen Ginsberg's okay. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So, it's come? Okay, that's on there. So basically, there are some cultural reservations that people have. So, now culture can mean food, culture can refer to dress, culture can refer to language. So, what happens is, if you see, is Krishna Bhakti dependent on a particular culture or is it transcendental to culture? That means, does one have to adopt a particular culture to reach Krishna? Or can Krishna be reached from whatever culture that is there in the world? So it's not an easy question to answer. If you see that when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's followers went to Manipur, the Manipuri Gaudiya Vaishnavas did not become Bengali Gaudiya Vaishnavas. They still had their Manipuri culture. They wear Manipuri dresses, they cook Manipuri food, they have Manipuri dance forms of devotion, and they are practicing bhakti. In India, Ram Bhakti is different in different parts of the country. So now we could say, but still it is Indian culture. It is a part of Sanatana Dharma. So I think that's the question. So in ISKCON, the prevalent idea was that the cultural is the way to the spiritual. Adopting a particular kind of dress, adopting a particular way of hair or beard or tilak or whatever. All these are integral, even essential to bhakti. Now, with respect to food, more or less, we have accepted the idea that it's universal. It's not that everybody in ISKCON is eating Bengali food. It's many of us. It's like Western culture entered into our lives through ISKCON, isn't it? Isn't it? I had never heard of chow mein before I came to ISKCON, isn't it? So, and nobody's having any problems with that. So, with respect to food, it seems to be culturally more inclusive. With respect to dress, with respect to language, so there are concerns. So basically, what he did was he did not emphasize so much on a particular dress. See, for Westerners, it's a cultural curiosity. Narasimha Maharaj had this festival of India, and many women line up to wear saris. It's just like an experience. I want to wear a sari. But from their cultural curiosity to cultural commitment, that's a huge leap. Wear a sari every day. That is too much. And in some ways, women have a little more license because there's women fashion, many things can be done. But in the West, for a man to wear a dhoti, the prominent image that comes in a Western mind when they see somebody wearing a dhoti, this is an oversized diaper. So it just seems weird for people. So, so basically, he did some adjustments by which it did not seem so foreign for people. So he was successful to some extent. I'm not saying he was hugely successful. More that rather than he being successful, it is more that we lost a lot of devotees. Not so much that he made a lot of devotees, rather people who came to us went to Gaudiya Math, went there. So both things happened. But I think devotees are exploring and trying various things, and things are being successful to significant degree. Through yoga audiences, we are reaching a lot of people. There is Raghunath Prabhu and Kaustubh Prabhu. They have this podcast called The Wisdom of the Sages. And it's amazing. They started the podcast, and every day they have several hundreds and hundreds of people hearing the podcast, thousands of downloads. And in the spirituality section, Eastern spirituality section, they are consistently among the top 5 podcasters. And they are presenting, they are actually teaching the right Bhagavatam itself. They take Bhagavatam, they take Prabhupada's purports, they select which purports to emphasize on. But it's reaching, and they're reaching. So things are changing. And say it will take time, but it will happen. Okay. Thank you. Which one stop? Okay. What's the time? Okay, 5-10 minutes. Yeah. Okay. Okay. A lot of questions. Sorry, I took a lot of time for your question. Where's the mic? Yeah.
I class you were explaining about the name of the ocean is not use our stop using or including. So basically many times too much question in the class, it is not something appreciated. Once you become a devotee, it's not something appreciated. And so many times if your nature is like you
Yeah, okay. So I got the question. If I don't got it, you can clarify. But generally, it is a problem I also faced when I was growing up. One devotee told me that, Chaitanya Charan, I think you've forgotten we are following Bhakti Marg, not Gyan Marg. So I was initially discouraged, but after I only annoyed. I said, the mark of my question is never going to come to you now. So then I found like-minded devotees. So yes, in general, the devotee community, questions will not be appreciated too much. But that does not mean no devotees will appreciate it. It is like-minded devotees. We have to find out devotees are analytical. And it applies in every field. See, some devotees may be very interested in kirtan. And sometimes when they sing also, their kirtan is not participatory, it's performative. They sing in such a complicated tune that you can be impressed, but you cannot sing only. Now, they may be very interested in kirtan and they may learn a lot of technicalities about kirtan, but they don't bring that to everyone. No, everybody is not interested in that. So, if we have questions, try to find out like minded devotees and talk with them. So, we have to be intelligent about whom to ask questions. Okay.
my extended question is like basically when you're too much dreaming, our faith on the too much develops based on the how we get the answers and how what the mood of the and so basically when we
See,
don't
over.
feel
Sorry, I got a question. I just want to answer some more questions. See, there will always be, sooner or later, we have to learn to separate spiritual advancement from material competence. In any field. Now, if somebody is very good at managing and they have a senior under whom they are working, that person is not good at management. The only way they will be able to maintain that respect is to separate their material competence from their spiritual advancement. I respect this person, he's dedicated many years of service, they're spiritually advanced, but they may not be materially competent. So, like that, same way, there are many non intellectual devotees whom I respect very much. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go and sit and hear their classes necessarily. That I respect them as individuals, but I don't get any philosophical nourishment from their classes. So if it's a part of some community or social obligation, I may hear. But I won't go out of the way to hear their classes. So we should be able to respect people based on either their spiritual advancement or even just their spiritual dedication. But that does not mean that we have to get inspiration in our particular area. So somebody may be a better singer than their spiritual master. Now, does that mean they can't respect their spiritual master because the spiritual master's musical ability is not that good? No. You see, spiritual advancement is separate from competence in a particular area. So that way, we can maintain our respect for our seniors. At the same time, we can make sure that our needs are addressed. So it's important that we make sure that our needs are addressed, but that does not mean the community's expectations or community's standards or the Vaishnava etiquette in general. that is neglected or rejected for that. Okay.
Like, well, I'm not like, you respect them, but to commit towards their project and all, like, I'm not so enthusiastic to commit to my senior project and all. So it feels like if I tell little insensitive, uh, I don't want to become like a free labor for the project because I'm not doing the tool and all.
That's
So,
fair enough. See,
and like, usually I have made a little,
see, in general, in our movement, it's not that if you want some space for yourself will not be given that. But generally, what happens is there are two things: there is freedom, or you can say the word is autonomy. Autonomy is a space to do what we want, and there is facility. So these two are generally mutually exclusive. If you want facility, you won't get autonomy. If you want autonomy, you won't get facility. Say, if I want to teach Bhagavad Gita in a different way from what is taught normally, and nobody's stopping me from teaching it. But if I want to do it in the temple may have particular vision of how Bhagavad Gita is to be taught. So if I want the facility, I may have to sacrifice the autonomy. So I would say that if we don't feel inspired by their project and we don't want to serve in their project, we can still maintain our respect, we can have our autonomy. But then if we have autonomy, then we can't expect facility. No, they may not be able to give too much time to us because we are not really doing much service. They may not be available for us as much they might be available to somebody who is engaged in their project. So that balance we'll have to make. How much autonomy I want, how much facility I want. Mhm. And as our movement is growing, we can also we can candidly talk with our seniors and tell them, maybe there is some more intellectual project which in which I can use my intelligence. I would like to be involved in that project. So that culture of lateral transfer has not yet become prominent in our movement, but it should become. Like say somebody is working in Intel, and they don't get along with their group leader, their team leader. Now that doesn't mean the team leader will immediately fire that person. They say, okay, you cannot. They will have the higher authorities, and then they will say, okay, you cannot work in this team. You work in this team. You don't work in this area. You work in this area. So that kind of culture of lateral transfer, it is done to some extent by the spiritual master directly, or some senior devotee on the level of spiritual master. Okay, you cannot work here. You can work here. But in general, within our movement, that level of thing is not happening. So, but if we talk candidly with our spiritual guides and say, I would like to do this kind of services, there's some opportunity for that. Then we may get opportunities. So, I was doing college preaching, but I was not just intellectually satisfied by doing college preaching. So Adeshambu connected me with senior devotees. I started doing editing for various senior Vaishnavas. That's when I got introduced to the whole Acharya's literature. I did editing of many books of Hanu Maharaj. And I did editing of books for other sannyasis. That's how I got introduced to more intellectual people. So, if we express our needs without criticizing the other person for not satisfying our needs. Hmm? So that this is my need, and I'm not minimizing or devaluing you, but this is my need right now. And they can guide us to someone who can satisfy our needs. So this has not been systematized. That's why we may have to take a particular initiative till now, so that we can do it. We will be able to do it better. Okay.
that means like my because like, I did not feel like usually corona I feel too much guilty of not being conforming to their expectation. So I feel like I'm dying too much in daily because of the feeling. I say I'm more guilty than all my friends who are not guilty because we are in a certain atmosphere where everyone is conformity is appreciated and obedience is encouraged. But you are like you are basically you told study you told about like Radha Maharaj. He doesn't instruct you. He gives suggestion. You want such kind of education, but when you don't get and we don't want to disrespect, so we always feel guilty constantly. More than thinking about other things, how I can improve my career, you're just thinking about uh, guilty yourself. I am not able to come to the goal of my
Yeah. It's a difficult situation. See, we have to see there is guilt and there is pseudo guilt. What do I mean by pseudo guilt? We basically see if I am here and there is some wrong action Hmm? Say basically some sinful activity or something like that is wrongdoing. And then there is Krishna. So guilt should come between us and the wrongdoing. Hmm? This is guilt. But if it comes here, it becomes pseudo guilt. Pseudo guilt means, see, anything that becomes an obstacle for us in moving toward Krishna, that is Maya. So guilt can be a good thing. If we do something wrong, we should feel bad after doing something wrong. But guilt can very easily be misplaced. I know one. He was born and brought up in a family where they were cattle rearing. And he said, when I stopped eating meat cow flesh, so I felt guilty as if I am betraying my family. For generations, this is what we have been doing. I stopped participating that. I felt guilty as, so that guilt is that is not a healthy guilt. So we have to, we don't have to, anything that is discouraging us in our bhakti, we have to find a way to put it aside. So, yes, sometimes we may not be as surrendered as someone else, but that doesn't make us a bad devotee. It means, okay, this is not the way I can grow. So then we have to find a way in which we can grow without disrupting the whole system, without criticizing or disrupting the whole system. So don't let guilt come in the way. Tasmad aham vigata viklava ishwarasya. Prahlad in his prayer says that, he initially says that, how can I glorify your Lord? I'm Harer Ugra Jati, I'm born in a demoniac family. But then, vigata viklava ishwarasya. Prabhupada in the sentence, word to word translation says, giving up all thoughts of my unfitness. So I will stop contemplating on how I am unfit. So he says, I will glorify the Lord. Granami Mahinji. I glorify the Lord. So, yes, we may be unfit for a particular role or a particular service, but that shouldn't become the focus of our consciousness. Okay, that may be true, but still I want to serve Krishna. And with my swabhava, my particular orientation, how can I find a way to serve Krishna? So focus on that. Mm. So when you start focusing on that, we will find Krishna will guide. Dadami buddhi yogam tam. Mm. It is not that Radhishampu suggested to me, you edit for these devotees. I suggested, I like these classes, so can I connect with them? He says, connect them, what will you do? I said, oh yeah, I'm editing your books, I can edit their books also. I said, yeah, that's a good service. You don't be, he said, you should not be just taking their time for your intellectual need. You should be doing some service. And I appreciated that point. So in some ways, he facilitated my connection with senior devotees. So we have our needs, and if our needs are not being fulfilled, we should not feel guilty about that. Guilt can be unfavorable to bhakti at times. So, will we have any other session after this? No, no? Okay. We have to go for another program, unfortunately. How many questions are there? One, two, three, four. Okay. Okay, sir. Okay, we can talk personally. Yes, bro. Okay, sure. Okay. Yeah, you can talk. We'll take this one last question. We'll stop. Yes, bro. Sorry, sir. Slowly and loudly. Yeah. So then my first question, loyalty means this works for me and I will stick to it. Hmm? That is loyalty. Fanaticism means what works for me. is the only thing that can work for anyone. Hmm? What works for me is the only thing that actually works. And if anybody is doing anything else, that's wrong. There's a very significant difference between loyalty and fanaticism. So, fanaticism is basically projecting our experience on everyone else. Somebody may get a lot of strength by say doing Nirjala Ekadashi fasting. This is my seriousness in bhakti. But that does not mean everybody who is not doing Nirjala Ekadashi is not a serious dude, isn't it? They may get strength by they may eat food, but they may chant extra rounds. Somebody may chant, may read more Bhagavatam, whatever. Different. Krishna is not a machine. Krishna is a person. And Krishna can reciprocate with different people in different ways. And one meaning of Sarvadharman Pratijamamekam Sharanam Raja is if you consider dharma to mean our conception of how to reach Krishna. That I have a particular way I am reaching Krishna. I think I'll reach Krishna, but Krishna can be reached in many different ways. So we have to be open to that. So that when loyalty becomes fanatical, then it creates unnecessary disruption in society. Now, with respect to other Gaudiya Vaishnavas, it depends. We have to look at each person. Not that everybody was Sahajiyas. See, nobody else set up an institution, at least not at the scale of Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur. Now, one problem with institution creates standardization. And standardization has to be based on objectively measurable parameters. And objectively measurable parameters are associated with quantity. Now, bhakti is about quality. It's not just quantity. Now, quality and quantity they are related. It's a complex question how exactly they are related. But the point is, Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur, because of emphasizing an institution, started also concomitantly emphasizing quantitative parameters. Now, those quantitative parameters were not emphasized or met by his other god. His brother Lit Prasad was also a devotee. He was also a prominent leader in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition by others. So they also practice bhakti. They also continue the bhakti, and they are also Gaudiya Vaishnavas. But we need to respect them for that. But that does not necessarily mean that they are all Sahajiyas. They don't. But that doesn't mean that all of them are glorious Vaishnavas. We have to see individually. So it would be too extreme to say that nobody who, apart from God, Bhaktisiddhanta Thakur was a proper Gaudiya Vaishnava. So it is nuanced understanding. Neither not the extreme of everybody being a Sahajiya or everybody being a Gaudiya Vaishnava. We have to see what they are doing, and based on that, we have to decide. Thank you very much. Granthra, okay, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Jai Gaur Premanande.
Hare Krishna. Very grateful for the class. We thank for the we are very bad right? So we have book discussion marathon going on. And 1 December today, and scores of different yogas and brahmachari. So basic wise, that is Rata wise, 5 Mahavir books. Shantipur Yoga, HSR layout, 22 Mahavir books. Navdeep Yoga, Velam Yoga, 164 books. Shiva Saga, 200 books. Brahmachari team till now have received 1,444 books. Means those keep inspiring. Our target is 30,000 together. Keep inspiring and spreading most of our books. And also for the Bangladesh devotees, from the GDC, there's a communication about praying. So I will speak it out. Dear Lord Krishna, dear Lord Chaitanya, kindly bless and protect all the devotees and other religious minorities in Bangladesh. May the current children tensions be peacefully resolved and may lasting harmony be established in the land of Bangladesh. There. So many are asking what they can do in help devotees in Bangladesh. There is Guru Patrick Maharaj. We are asking all ISKCON devotees trying to offer a heartfelt prayer, especially this Sunday and over the next few days, remembering ISKCON devotees and community. ISKCON is a peaceful organization and devotees in Bangladesh contribute in many ways to their country. State Alatawajal, ISKCON is a communication. Unfortunately, some who don't respond well, interpreting, misrepresenting us and the peaceful intention. Yeah. So earlier this week, the Bangladesh High Court rejected a plea to ban ISKCON. We are most grateful to the High Court for the civil support ISKCON with us. So we pray for it. We wanted to have Ketan, but already ended. If we try to the level of Ketan, what will happen over here for praying to the Bangladeshi, what we make the sadhana. So, thank you. Hare Krishna.